This is A Course in Miracles, Chapter 2, Section 3, The Altar of God. The atonement can only be accepted within you by releasing the inner light. Since the separation, defenses have been used almost entirely to defend against the atonement and thus maintain the separation. This is generally seen as a need to protect the body. The main body fantasizes in which minds engage arise from the distorted belief that the body can be used as a means for attaining atonement. Perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step in correcting this distortion because it alters only part of it. It does recognize that atonement in physical terms is impossible. The next step, however, is to realize that a temple is not a structure at all. Its true holiness lies at the inner altar around which the structure is built. The emphasis on beautiful structures is a sign of the fear of atonement and an unwillingness to reach the altar itself. The real beauty of the temple cannot be seen with the physical eye. Spiritual sight, on the other hand, cannot see the structure at all because it is perfect vision. It can, however, see the altar with perfect clarity. For perfect effectiveness, the atonement belongs at the center of the inner altar, where it undoes the separation and restores the wholeness of the mind. Before the separation, the mind was invulnerable to fear because fear did not exist. Both the separation and the fear are miscreations that must be undone for the restoration of the temple and for the opening of the altar to receive the atonement. This heals the separation by placing within you the one effective defense against all separation thoughts and making you perfectly invulnerable. The acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time. This may appear to contradict free will because of the inevitability of the final decision, but this is not so. You can temporize and you are capable of enormous procrastination, but you cannot depart entirely from your Creator, who set the limits on your ability to miscreate. An imprisoned will engenders a situation which, in the extreme, becomes altogether intolerable. Tolerance for pain may be high, but it is not without limit. Eventually, everyone begins to recognize, however dimly, that there must be a better way. As this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a turning point. This ultimately reawakens spiritual vision, simultaneously weakening the investment in physical sight. The alternating investment in the two levels of perception is usually experienced as conflict, which can become very acute. But the outcome is as certain as God. Spiritual vision literally cannot see error and merely looks for atonement. All solutions the physical eye seeks dissolve. Spiritual vision looks within and recognizes immediately that the altar has been defiled and needs to be repaired and protected. Perfectly aware of the right defense, it passes over all others, looking past error to truth. Because of the strength of its vision, it brings the mind into its service. This reestablishes the power of the mind and makes it increasingly unable to tolerate delay, realizing that it only adds unnecessary pain. As a result, the mind becomes increasingly sensitive to what it would once have regarded as very minor intrusions of discomfort. The children of God are entitled to the perfect comfort that comes from perfect trust. Until they achieve this, they waste themselves and their true creative powers on useless attempts to make themselves more comfortable by inappropriate means. But the real means are already provided and do not involve any effort at all on their part. The atonement is the only gift that is worthy of being offered at the altar of God because of the value of the altar itself. It was created perfect and is entirely worthy of receiving perfection. God and his creations are completely dependent on each other. He depends on them because he created them perfect. He gave them his peace so they could not be shaken and could not be deceived. Whenever you are afraid, you are deceived, and your mind cannot serve the Holy Spirit. This starves you by denying you your daily bread. God is lonely without his sons, and they are lonely without him. They must learn to look upon the world as a means of healing the separation. The atonement is the guarantee that they will ultimately succeed. It's to realize that a temple is not a structure at all, and that the real beauty of the temple cannot be seen with the physical eye. Recently, I was looking at this 3D depiction of a mandala, of the Kala Chakra mandala, which in Tibetan Buddhism is really rich and meaningful. And every little line, every little part of the structure has some meaning or some significance. And I was talking to a friend about mandalas because her kid and her friends color in different mandalas. And she was like, you have to fill it completely. And I was like, well, not necessarily, just because of this three-dimensional mandala, where it's actually the structure of a temple, essentially, and actually having space inside of those mandalas, inside of those temples, is where that space for the divinity, that place of real atonement, or what is really at the center of what we really want, to basically give room for it. So there's something really beautiful about this, that the beauty of the temple cannot be seen with the physical eye, and that spiritual sight can't see the structure at all because it is perfect vision. And realizing that, altars, there are so many different sort of altars that we make. And I'm thinking more metaphorical altars. What are the things that we worship? What are the things that we strive for? What are the successes that we hope for? And each of those being, like a temple in our mind. And what are we creating the space for? And in this case, it's really clarifying that atonement is really at the center of what we really want. And when you have that spiritual lens on, then you can see that so clearly, that, as it says later on. Okay, so what it says is the acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time, and that you can temporize and you're capable of enormous procrastination, but you cannot depart entirely from your Creator. It left me with a sense of peace, actually, because sometimes in this world, it really seems like even if you're on a spiritual path and you have a spiritual awakening and you're like, okay, it's clear, I know exactly what I want, I know that I'm headed towards waking up, but then you see everyone else and then you see the rest of the world and you're like, oh man, this is never going to happen. But just knowing that it's inevitable, that everyone, which is really everyone, just one, it's really trusting that we are, on that path, and that it is inevitable. And no matter what we do, we're going to get there. It just might be enormous procrastination. And this line too, which is that everyone eventually begins to recognize, however dimly, that there must be a better way, is like music to my ears, because I know that when those words are uttered and I hear someone, whether I'm doing a healing session or just having a conversation, or in so many different contexts, when I've heard people talk about their challenges and their struggles, but then the recognition that, and hope and the desire that there must be another way, I know that this means that they're ready for change. And I mean like deep change, and not surface level change. Um, and it says that as this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a turning point. And so for so many people, just hitting the end of the road of the way that they've been doing something, whether it's work or relationship with themselves, or just the ways that they've interacted in the world, there comes a point where it's like there's all this effort and all this trying. The end of the road is like, well, this way doesn't get me anywhere. And that is when, there's almost this realization that this isn't it. There must be another way. And that's really what triggers people to get onto a spiritual path, and that this ultimately reawakens spiritual vision. And so, yeah, that's for many people, their spiritual awakening comes at a point where they've tried everything, or they're maybe desperate, and yet they know that that's not it. Like there's just a recognition that they've gone to the end of the road. They've tried everything possible on that path, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't led to peace. It hasn't led to whatever real result that they want in their hearts. So, yeah, ultimately, this chapter is, well, pretty much like every other section of A Course in Miracles, which is that it leads back to atonement, or the at-one-ment, coming together into oneness, and healing the separation. So I hope that has been helpful, and see you next time.